Nicole. Let's talk about it. Tell me all about it. I'm here. I wanna know what's on your mind. Ooh, the world needs to hear from you, and I'm so glad to have a conversation to reach the nation. And it's all about you. We'll help each other to discover innovative ways to positively change the world. Let's talk about, let's talk about, yeah. Let's talk about Conversations with Nicole.
Greetings. Welcome to Conversations with Nicole. I am Nicole Everett, your host, and Conversations with Nicole is a talk show based in Tallahassee, Florida, focused on connecting the community through conversations. And today is what I call Wellness Wednesday, which is an opportunity for you, me, and my guests to chat about something interesting and intriguing. And today we are actually doing a part 2 to a conversation that I had with a wonderful panel back in July of this year entitled Early Childhood Trauma's Impact on Families and Schools. And so I have that same panel here who is very dynamic and phenomenal. I'm super excited to have them all here with me tonight. But before I bring them on, I need to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from? Let us know in the comments so we can give you a shout out. This is an interactive, live, safe space for us to engage, and this topic is pretty heavy. So, I want to just kind of prepare you for that, but we really want to try to help move the needle on this topic because this is really at the core of what I believe all human behavior. Childhood trauma is a big deal. And so I see some folks that are chiming in. So Chandra Honecker, she says, hello, my wonderful sister, Dr. Simms. You're looking good. So thank you for being here. Dr. Monica, all the best. Good evening. So real quick, shout out to Dr. Monica. Dr. Monica brought this topic to my attention back. Oh, it's been several months, probably in the spring. And so she has helped to curate this panel that I'm super excited and delighted to have with me tonight. So thank you, Dr. Monica, for being here. And Miss Iris Davis Pendleton, who is here in Tallahassee, thank you for joining us. So y'all, please like, please share, please tag a friend. Let them know they need to be on here because this is going to be a very dynamic conversation. Lakeisha J, Dr. J, thank you for being here. A great panel ahead. Yes, appreciate you so much. All right, so I am going to start with reading our bios for our guests. Dr. Shairi. Dr. Shairi Turner is an internist and pediatrician with expertise in trauma-informed practices in public health. She leads the crisis text line, public policy, and advocacy team. She also has extensive experience having been the first chief medical director for the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice. She has also been a faculty consultant for the National Center for Trauma-Informed Care. Her accolades just go on. And if you really want to hear all of this again, just check out the first one. So listen, this panel is stellar. So I'm not going to read all their bios like I did last time. Just know that they know what they're talking about. Okay. So Dr. Shairi Turner, y'all, please help me welcome her. Yes.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone.
Yes.
We are back today for part 2 because it felt like there was such an incredible response and so many questions when we did this panel several months ago. And what we really come here to talk about is young people, children, and the challenges that exist, particularly for children who have been in the foster care system or who have been adopted, and just we talked last time about some of the trauma that they experience, both in and out of the system, and also the fact that going through the adoption process, the foster care system can cause or create a diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder, which is really where we focused, because we felt like, and you'll meet the other panelists if you're just joining us this first time, who are parents and really have taken this journey and want to share their experiences with you, because reactive attachment disorder is not a diagnosis necessarily that many people will give to these children, when in fact it is an important, very, very important diagnosis to have, because once you have a diagnosis, you're able to outline a better treatment plan, right? And these are children who have either been removed from their parents or have been neglected by their parents, and it's the development of abnormal attachment behaviors in childhood, to the point where they really don't necessarily seek comfort from adults and can have some very reactive behaviors, which will make it difficult for them to exist in the school system. Oftentimes they find themselves inpatient, hospitalized, heavily medicated, without the right diagnosis. Oftentimes oppositional defiant disorder, all these other kind of, or ADHD, all these other diagnoses that don't lead us down the path that we need to go once we understand reactive attachment disorder, and how parents can work with children who have that diagnosis, and how teachers and the schools need to understand that diagnosis. So I will leave that as our recap. We have just tremendous panelists to welcome. Nicole, welcome. And we'll get started on this part 2 to really talk about where we go from here and build upon the conversation from last time.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that recap, Dr. Turner. So next I'm going to bring on Dr. Cassandra Simms, who is a board-certified adult and child adolescent psychiatrist, and she's been certified by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. She's received her medical degree from the University of Kentucky. She completed her psychiatry residency and child adolescent fellowship at the University of South Carolina. She is in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where she's worked with Focused Psychiatric Services and the Park Ridge Valley Hospital, treating children and adolescents in outpatient and inpatient settings. She, in 2009, became a faculty member with the University of Tennessee School of Medicine. And she also has served with the community health systems via Sky Ridge Medical Center in Cleveland, Tennessee. She also has added to her task, her roles and responsibilities of being the psychiatrist for a behavioral health all-male short-term residential facility in Tennessee as well. So again, wealth of knowledge and experience. So y'all help us welcome Dr. Cassandra Simms. Yay. Thank you for being here, Dr. Simms. I appreciate you so much. Yes, my pleasure. All right. And then I want to go ahead and bring our parents on. I'm going to start with Miss Ward. Tonja Ward has dedicated over 25 years of service to youth, families, and communities. Experience in nonprofit leadership. She aids organizations with project management, outreach and engagement initiatives, marketing and promotions. She has a lot of service, having worked with faith-based ministry industry, worked with youth ministries and churches in several states, serving on nonprofit boards, co-founded the Charlie and Tonja Ward Family Foundation, which had a kickoff this week for a wonderful ranch that they are building here in Tallahassee to serve us regionally, serve the youth regionally. And so we are super excited about that. But she is a New York licensed attorney. She completed her bachelor's degree at Spelman College, master's degree at the University of Southern California, and a law degree from the University of Miami Law School. She is a dedicated wife and mother. And she cherishes her family life with her husband and her 3 children. And their family has a strong commitment to advocacy for the foster and adoptive family community. So, y'all, help me welcome Miss Tonja Ward. Yay! Thank you for being here. All right, good deal. All right, you're muted, so I don't know if you. Yes.
Glad to be here.
There we go. All right, good deal. Thank you, thank you. All right, and last but certainly not least, we have, and hers is in a different place, so y'all just bear with me. Keeping up with the bios. All right, Miss Lisa Pontoriero. She has been married for 14 years. She's the mother of 6 children that her and partner have adopted. And she's been fostering 2 little ones for just over 2 years, and they are ages 2 and 3. She's been fostering parents. They have been foster parents for close to 13 years and have approximately 20 children come through their home. Not every ending is a happy one. She has a bachelor's of science in sociology with a minor in women's studies and a master's in social work from the Florida State University. Her experience includes time working in a residential program and also as a behavioral specialist for at-risk youth. She served as a forensic interviewer and was an expert witness while working with child protection teams. Also, spent several years working with victims of crimes as a victim advocate, and then went through the police academy and served our community as a police officer. Currently retired and a stay-at-home mom after seeing so many children that needed a stable, loving home while their family was facing hardships. She knew she wanted to stand in the gap and be consistent, protective caregivers to help provide a nurturing environment for children that by no fault of their own need to be in a safe place where they could receive love and guidance as they process the traumas they had experienced. So y'all help me welcome Miss Lisa P. Welcome, welcome,
Thanks for
welcome.
having us.
Yes, 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 yes. So again, so glad to have you all back here with us this evening. So I want to start out with just, if you don't mind, Lisa and Tonja specifically, just kind of tell us where you are now, based, from July to now, like what's kind of transpired in the lives of your children.
Well, I'll go first.
Okay.
Our youngest is still in a residential program and has begun to be more stable and has made some improvements.
Mm.
And I think that with our children, sometimes they have to really test the boundaries to see if they're in a situation that they can get themselves out of before they actually start doing the work
Yeah.
to receive the therapy, the counseling, the healing that they need, and to develop the coping skills. And so I think he has passed the point where he recognizes that he's not going to be able to get himself kicked out of this situation. So he's actually beginning to try and work towards growing and maturing and improving. And we were just with him about a week ago.
Okay.
And really excited about his progress. I mean, still bumps in the road, and they say he'll do great, and then he'll make a bonehead decision. But it's just that we're hoping that we're the trajectory is like fewer of those bonehead decisions, or the ability to recover is one of the things that we're beginning to see improvement on. So just really grateful for it's inch by inch progress. And so we just try and celebrate each little milestone. We know we're in a marathon, it's not a sprint, and we still got a long way to go.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that update. What about you, Lisa?
Well, our son is also in a residential program, and he's been there about 6 months. And we were getting close to his discharge date. However, we've had the experience of he's starting to act out aggressively. We're starting to see some not so positive behavior. So we're having a little bit of a regression. So we've pushed back, or they've pushed back his discharge date. And we were able to have our first home visit this past weekend. So he did get to come home. But he's having a very hard time, I guess, really understanding what he needs to do. Exactly what Tonja just said. He is very reading people and kind of manipulating and playing people and figuring out what he needs to do. But as far as the work, right now we're in the push-pull part of the relationship, he and his therapist. And it's very, very difficult for people to find the right diagnoses. That was mentioned earlier on. Right now, we are dealing with 2 of those diagnoses that were mentioned by Dr. Turner, ADHD and oppositional defiant disorder. But they're looking at RAD, reactive attachment disorder, as a possibility. So it's a lot of exploring. Even though they're in the program, there's room for exploring and trying to understand more about what's going on. And the whole time we're doing that with him, we have other kids at home that we're dealing with their normal lives and things that they have going on what would be considered a more normal trajectory, school and activities and things of that nature. So being the parent and having different hats on at different times for different kids is very chaotic at times, very rewarding, because you do see those incremental changes, and you're so thankful for them when they happen.
Yeah.
And at the same time, sometimes 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But when it's your kids, you'll make the same trek 1,000 times. And that's what we do as parents. And we not only do it for our kids that are going through mental health crisis or a mental health journey, but we also do that with our kids that are struggling with just day-to-day life of becoming a college student or learning guitar or taking cheerleading. So that's part of being a parent.
Thank you for sharing that, Lisa. I think the realness of your experience is it needs to be heard. So I really appreciate that. We have a few more folks that have joined us that I do want to acknowledge. Ms. Kesey, who is here. Thank you for being here, Kesey. She's here in Tallahassee. City Commissioner Diane Williams Cox is on. Thank you for being here with us as well as Kristen Andrews. Thank you for joining us. So I want to bring Dr. Simms on just to talk a little bit about RAD, just in terms of kind of give us a little bit, since you work in this every day in terms of the youth that you encounter at the facility that you are working. I just want you to shine some light on specifically this condition.
Okay. Well, I feel it's a condition we don't get a lot of training in, even just going through medical school, and definitely medical school, but then going into psychiatry and doing your residency program, you get a glimpse of it, but the training that's needed to truly understand it is not there. And that's not a fault of any system. It depends who comes through the kind of program. But in the over 20 years I've been doing this, it's one of those that's very misunderstood. It's missed most of the time, or misdiagnosed as bipolar or something else, rather than kind of going into the trenches and figuring it out. So it gets misdiagnosed, but I do feel it's one of the most difficult diagnoses to treat, due to the connections that need to be made and the behaviors that can kind of come when those connections are made. So it's generally seen for individuals where they're born in an adoption family, orphanage, or there's a lot of trauma kind of as a youth where the attachments that are supposed to happen at a young age don't necessarily happen. And so a lot of people feel they may make the attachments, but there's something when the chemicals of the brain at those young ages, they're just not produced. They're produced, but in a different way. The levels are not elevated as they should be, which ends up causing behavioral issues as they progress through life. And so with that, the behaviors are, as they grow up and they are supposed to make connections. If you have a baby that's born, they cry when they're hungry. They cry when they need to go to the bathroom. They cry when they're sick. But when there's a situation where there's trauma, neglect, abandonment, when those cries are not met, the attachments aren't made. And so the individual ends up growing up to where they can't necessarily trust the environment. So when they're in an environment that they don't feel love, affection, and attachment from those early developmental toddler years, they get into a home life that's full of love and affection, and it's very foreign to them. So as you attach, as you normally attach as a mother, that it creates a lot of discomfort and mistrust in that, because that's not what they're used to. So you get a lot of behaviors that elevate to push that away. And so that's why you get the yo-yo. They know it's what's supposed to happen, but it seems so foreign that the world didn't come to me when I cried when I was younger. Okay. When I cried, it either brought me trauma, it brought me something that was not a welcome behavioral reaction that's affectionate or attachment related. So with that, as I grow up and when I need things for myself, there's always this feeling that I have to rely on myself when I can't rely on others. So sometimes, and it could be seen as not even wanting a tutor. I mean, I've had some kids who will not ask for help whatsoever because it's so intrinsic in them that they just don't feel that they can trust anything, even from the simple, just I need help. And so when you get that connection, the behaviors escalate and they push away, because it's like, let me push someone away before they actually reject me. And that becomes in a lot of the relationships that they develop through the years, especially in the parental relationship. But what people don't realize is that I may have these kids up to 18, but it doesn't stop there. It stops when they have a relationship with someone, because that's an attachment. How will they attach with that individual they want to marry? How will they attach when they actually have kids of their own? Okay. And so it's so crucial, and people that watch this and learning from the parents that are living this in this program right now, because they're getting them help at this stage, because it's going to make the base for when they are on their own and have to develop those relationships themselves. And so going through this, what they're going through is so crucial, because they're going to need those skills when they meet their spouse, when they have their kids. We didn't really always have those kids that long, but a girl taught me years ago. I saw her for many years in and out of the hospital when I was doing inpatient work, and I switched jobs, and I was doing some partial hospitalization program, and this young lady came across because she was suicidal. And she says, Dr. Simms, do you remember me? And I said, oh, of course. Her adoptive parents put her back into the system at 17 and a half.
Oh, my.
She was definitely diagnosed with RAD, but she went back in the system at 17 and a half. When I met her, it was Christmas holidays. It was almost approaching New Year's Eve. And she said, I never understood reactive attachment when I was 15, 16, 17, 18. But now I have a kid and now I understand it. And so really she was, and this kind of just what clicked in me. She came in my life for a reason at that time, because she says, I don't want to be home for Christmas for my child because I don't think I can be with and do the connections. And so she was in the program because of the closeness and all the attachments that come with the holidays. And by New Year's Eve, she actually went inpatient. Okay. She didn't stay outpatient. She just couldn't bear the connection. So we got her extra help at that point, because at that time she was an adult. But that just shows that the fight is, the mom's doing it now. It's an example of doing it now, so that later on that they know how to do that fight for themselves.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's powerful. Very, very powerful. All right. So Dr. Turner, help me out.
Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think just in thinking about how, Tonja and Lisa, your experiences with the school system, I think there still bears the conversation for those who might not have been here last time. Your experiences with the school system, and knowing that both of your children exhibited some level of reactive attachment disorder. What would you tell parents? What would you tell school administrators that they need to do or look for or be receptive to for these children when they encounter them, based on your experiences? Tonja?
Yeah, well, one of the things I would say, having moved and having to put my child in a new school environment, oftentimes the school wants to learn the child for themselves, and it ends up being a waste of time and sets us all up for failure when we have an opportunity to share things that the school can anticipate, because we know the behaviors that are going to happen, and those things that happen, as Dr. Simms mentions, once the child is starting to attach to the teacher and recognize that this isn't necessarily just not trying to make up for the behavior, but it's not just disciplinary behavior, but there should be a different way of dealing with it, knowing that that's actually meaning that the child is beginning to connect. And so we've got to figure out other strategies to help him self-regulate or help them self-regulate. So I would just encourage educators to really to listen to families. I think that often, because I think Lisa's different. She's got some training that I don't have, but I know my child, and I have been advocating and fighting for him. So I think that there should be some credibility given to that as we collaborate for the best plan, and it shouldn't be delayed just because that a specific expert has not said, this is what needs to happen. I think that, that's a missed opportunity for a successful transition for a child in a school when the parents aren't giving aren't listened to or acknowledged. Their input's not acknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is extremely valuable statements, because being a parent, you become an expert in your child. Maybe not in a specific field or an aspect, but in knowing your child, you are the expert. And it's very difficult for people at school, doctors, psychiatrists, for everyone to understand that we know our kids. So I think sometimes when we have to start over, at ground zero, every time we, start a service or go to school or a new doctor, any of those things, it does feel like a huge waste of time. And it's very frustrating for us and for our children. It's very, very frustrating. The other thing that I think is really important as a parent, and I is just the importance of documenting everything. Document every single thing that happens, everybody that you talk to. Make sure you have all that information, because sometimes they don't always listen to us as being the parents. But when I can come in and say, this doctor said this, or this counselor did that, that has helped us. I would love to see the time frames cut in half or even more. Everything takes so long to get any help. When we tried to get Ryder, our son's IEP, when we tried to get his IEP, it took me not weeks, not months, years to get his IEP.
Mm-hmm.
And because every time a different teacher would have a different perspective about our son. So everything would shift. He would do well based on RAD. He would do well with this teacher for a while, and then they would table the IEP conversation until he had enough and he wanted to sabotage that relationship. And then we would bring the IEP back up, but now it's the end of the school year. So the time frames for getting things done really bogs us down as parents, because sometimes before you can move forward in getting your child treatment, they want to see that you've accomplished A, B, C, D. And they won't even consider you for certain treatments or for residential or for different therapies until you've done other aspects of whatever they're requesting of you. And that can be very overwhelming for me as a parent, very overwhelming and very frustrating, because resources don't always exist in our area. And we live a little bit outside of Tallahassee, although we utilize Tallahassee for our services. Mm-hmm. We live a little bit outside of Tallahassee, but services in our area are very depleted. It's very difficult to get services. And as a foster parent and an adoptive parent, a lot of our kids are on Medicaid. So that also plays into the type of services that we're allowed to ascertain for our children. And it makes it very, very difficult. and finding professionals that are aware of, that are trauma informed, that are understanding that our kids come from trauma, that adoption, oh, it's beautiful and it's wonderful and let's pat everybody on the back, but adoption is a trauma. Adoption is a trauma. I love my children. They all came to me through adoption, but the reality is, for them to get to me, they went through a lot. And part of that was the adoption process. So I think there's just so many different layers to this, and the time constraints are one of the things that really, really frustrates me, because we want to get to our kids while they're young. We want to get them services as fast as we can. And we're going to ask for one more thing. We don't only want to get them as fast, we want them to be correct. And getting the correct diagnosis takes a very long time, because sometimes we're the only person that is truly seeing how the child's acting, because like kids do and people do, sometimes they hide themselves from teachers, doctors, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a multifaceted issue. And I think that having more resources, having more training, cutting through a lot of the red tape, not starting at ground zero every single time. If a teacher in a school district in Texas said that this child has this issue, why don't we just trust that? Because the parent's validating it and saying that's what's going on. Let's move along. Yeah. We don't need to recreate the wheel. So those are some of the things that are on my Christmas wish list this year.
I just want to elevate what I think you said that was really, really important, Lisa, and that is that adoption is a trauma. Because when we look at the adverse childhood experiences, and that list has kind of broadened, but one of the original traumas was loss of a parent to death or divorce, right? But the flip side of that is loss of a parent through adoption, right? That's the flip side is abandonment, right? So the child somehow winds up leaving the family, or is removed from the family. For those parents who have the aha moment listening to you all, Dr. Simms, what would you say, what's the with knowledge is power, right? So if the parents who are listening to this say, all right, reactive attachment disorder is the diagnosis that I have been missing, that no one has talked about, what would they do next, right? Do they seek out, do they come with the list, they Google and come with a list of, these are the things that I see in my child. We need to, give this diagnosis so that we can treat appropriately? Or what do they do so that they don't take this protracted path that Tonja and Lisa had to take, because no one was there identifying reactive attachment disorder in their children early?
Okay. So, Dr. Simms, before you answer, we're a little more than halfway through our talk. I want to acknowledge Warren Cave, who has joined us. He says, hello there, my sister Tonja Ward. Also, Dr. Monica has a question. So after you answer that one, she has another one for you, Dr. Simms. So, okay.
One, I do think like adoption services from day one, anybody considering adoption needs to have some reactive attachment training. I think that should be a requirement. I think adoption services, they should want all parents to have that, but they don't, because it can scare them away. Okay. All right. But because it's so necessary. It has to be there. I mean, it needs to start from day one. So backtracking. So everybody have some kind of training. That's the system that needs to happen. If that were happening, I would say that parents from the day one of adoption, go ahead and have some attachment therapy, find an attachment therapist, which is very difficult to find. Okay. But if you can't, even just a family therapist, just someone that person can develop a rapport with at that young age, so that a rapport, so if it's not someone they can connect with, we can change and not waste our time. Okay. So, because it's going to need that connection of someone that understands RAD and can take them through it. So with that, fast track, because like you said, Miss Lisa, that most people are on Medicaid going through the adoption program. Most of the kids are. So with that, there's certain requirements that insurance looks for treatment. Okay. So failure of outpatient. So find a psychiatrist and find a therapist. Okay, almost immediately, even if they don't need medicine at that time, just that you have them in that doctors and that therapist data bank, so that you're not having to search and wait for 3 to 6 months to get on someone's schedule. Okay, because most child adolescent psychiatrists are booked out for at least 6 months or more. And so with that, as soon as you can, go ahead and get on a list. Let the PCP know so they can manage until you can get on that list. But that's kind of the, like she was saying, the struggles with finding a provider. So get on that list, stay on it, especially if they acknowledge and they have some kind of experience in reactive attachment. I'm going to tell you, a lot of doctors are scared of it because we know it's hard. Okay, we know it's hard. We know it's a long road. It's a battle that we stay with. Like, I have to be with them 20 years, just like the parents have to be with them forever to kind of make that dent in what you need to do. That doctor needs to be able to hang in there with it, because they're going to give the doctor behaviors just as much to push them away and not want them in their office too. So, but you let them, you say you can do whatever, you're still coming back the next time. So it's make sure we have a therapist, a psychiatrist, kind of make sure we can have that relationship developed. The loopholes that they ask you to kind of go through is failure. The reason being because they want failure of outpatient. For failure of outpatient to happen, insurance will approve inpatient. For failure of inpatient acute services, most insurances look for a failure of at least 2 inpatient stays. Okay. So inpatient stays, you have them, then you can look into getting in-home services, if not at the same time. Such that when you get to residential, if you should need it, you have had those failures, so insurance approves residential. So they look for failure of outpatient, inpatient, and failure of in-home services, and that gives you good coverage for a residential stay. Okay, so those are the loopholes. But if you don't know, you don't know. You keep going to acute, and if the hospital doesn't say, "Hey, let's look at the residential," and you don't know that's an option, you don't know that's an option. So always tell parents, look into your residential. If they're thinking to adopt, look into their insurance and see what their residential coverage is. Because I may not need it at 5, I may not need it at 10, but I may need it at 15. Okay, all right. Because that's when hormones hit, and that's a difficult time in general. Okay, because they're liking boys and girls, and that type of stuff's happening. So then you're prepared psychiatrically for mental health benefits should that kind of happen. And of course, no one knows this because no one's telling our families early on in their situation. They don't know. And so this just needs, I think, to be a blanket thing that as we adopt, our parents have an understanding, should they have the battle of reactive attachment, that they know what to do. But it starts with day one.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to go back to Dr. Monica's question, which is, Dr. Simms, if providers don't diagnose carefully, how do treatment programs provide the needed services and treatment modalities?
One, you got to see if and it's not a lot of them, okay, that actually specialize in reactive attachment. Because a lot of hospitals, I want to tell you this, if they see reactive attachment as a diagnosis, some hospitals will deny, okay? Some residential treatments will deny if they see reactive attachment as a criteria. So in some places, it's an exclusion criteria. I personally know that, so sometimes I don't have it on the list, okay? All right, because if I need my child in there that's a client, I know that's a good facility, I know what they offer, then I know that child may benefit from that program because I know what that program has. So that's one thing that families battle, is if the doctor is sometimes honest that there's some facilities that's an exclusionary criteria. So it's finding out if if that's one of them. Okay, if it's not, you're basically home free. But what they offer is an understanding of the illness, thorough diagnosis, especially if they have a psychologist on board that can do actually psychological testing. So that's something to look for, because you get testing all at one spot rather than having to do it necessarily through the school system or through a private psychologist. So if they have that, some places do. That's a win plus one, because you're getting it all at one place, and the psychologist gets to actually meet the child in person and get some observatory information from residential staff, their therapist that's there with the residential team, as well if there's a psychiatrist or on board. Okay, so you get extra information and you get eyes on the behaviors that they don't get to see in the office. So I don't live with them, so I don't get to see all those behaviors. But when I'm doing residential work, I get to see the tantrums, I get to see the triggers, I get to see the explosions, I get to see if they attack others, if they attack the adults, if they attack the teachers. I get to basically be in that spot that parents are in every single day. But I get to go home. Okay, all right. the parents live it day to day, all day. And so, but I get a piece of what the stress and the parents live through. And so if I can feel it, then I know what to go after. And I think that's the benefit of what the residential programs can offer when it's done correctly. Okay. So good med management, an understanding of attachment, understanding of trauma, and how they will react when those attachments start to happen in the facility. The behaviors are going to go up when they attach. So when they attach to the therapist in the facility, when they attach to the psychiatrist in the facility, when they attach to peers and those peers are discharged, that's crucial. Okay, so when peers are discharged, if they've attached to someone that's in the unit, then their behavior is going to go up because that attachment, it feels like rejection and abandonment all over again. So that's another struggle that when they go into facility but it allows the therapist to work through that, process it, and actually see hands-on the feelings of rejection and abandonment that they kind of struggle with, which becomes an ongoing conflict between them and their home life.
All right. Thank you for that. So we have a few more comments and another question relative to sending a residential child home. But I want to acknowledge Brother Quasi, who's joined us out of the Atlanta area. Your sister, Dr. Simms, said, I also adopted a foster child, and she is spot on what she is saying. We have Dr. Paula Lewis, who is also a child psychiatrist on. She says, that is real talk. RADS training is necessary. I've assessed a number of students with RADS. Very hard to find specialists in this area. Thanks for making this critical point. Thank you, Dr. Lewis, for joining us. All right, Dr. Monica said, how do you send a residential child who is on a safety plan home for a visit to a family with children?
Are you talking about like discharged home or just for a visit? Looks like for a visit.
Yes, it looks like just for a visit. Dr. Monica, if you could give some clarity. I think it's just for a visit, but we want to make sure that's correct. Just let us know yes or no if it's just for a visit. All right. Can you just talk maybe a little bit about safety plans in general?
Does anybody else want to take it, or
anybody else want to talk about safety plans?
I can just speak to just a tiny bit about it because currently what we're dealing with our son is he is in a residential program, and they have different levels, and each program has a different terminology for the levels. But currently our son is on an individualized safety plan, and in his program, what that means is he is not to interact with other peers in his group. He's more isolated within his house, his cottage, and that he only deals with certain staff while he's on the safety plan. And he got on the safety plan because of a lot of the behaviors that Tonja and I are very familiar with: the acting out, the behaviors, the aggression, the refusing to take medication, the destruction of property, and physical aggression. And that's what I know about the safety plan. And they use it as a tool to continue to work with a child to help them utilize the skills that they're learning in the program, and then to help them kind of take a time out and to refocus and regroup while keeping everyone safe. And then they can start working on the normal levels of earning their privileges and being on a different level. At my son's program, they have 4 different levels. And like I said, he was on an individualized safety plan, and he's had to work back to get back onto the regular programs where he can have TV time and extra time on the phone and things of that nature. And it's a lot, because at home we don't have an opportunity to have an individualized safety plan. We don't have an opportunity to have these different levels. All this is happening in a fluid situation, and that's why it's so important for me while he's there. And this is our first time in a residential program, but while he's there, is we want the biggest bang for our buck. We want to know that he's ready when it's time for him to come home to implement those skills to the best of his ability and be at the highest level that he can be at, because we have other kids in the home that we have to make sure they're safe and they're being taken care of as well. So to speak a little bit about what Dr. Hayes was mentioning, we recently had a home visit with our son and he was on this plan, on the individualized safety plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a little concerning for me as a mom, as a parent, because we don't have a full staff. We're not up 24 hours a day, 7 days, 7 days a week, multiple people to step in. So it was a little, it felt a little much to have him on that level than be at home with other kids. So I don't know if that's a normal thing of how programs work. I don't know if Tonja, if you've experienced that, or Dr. Simms in your program, that's how things work. But that was our experience. And for me, it kind of took me back a little bit as to how to handle that and what we needed to do.
I think that so in the most facilities, they have those different levels. Okay. And usually the safety plan means you shouldn't go home. Okay. So because they're not obviously at a safe level to kind of be trusted to be at home. So like at ours, if they're on a safety, then when we have parent visitations or parent weekend, they're not allowed to go off campus. They have to stay on campus. So they have to be on a certain phase in order to have that privilege. So if they're not on that phase, then they have to everything has to be done on campus until they're able to get to that. So they'll have that safety plan as far as within the facility. But as far as safety planning going home, that is kind of individualized based. So hopefully they have worked through the program through the different phases. If they're in a safety plan within the facility, they're definitely not ready for discharge. Okay. So they have to move through the phases to have that safety plan created for discharge. And so that kind of gives families an outline of what to do in times of crisis and gives the kid an outline of what to do in times of crisis. Most of the parents already know because they've already been through it time and time again. Okay. So some of it's like, okay. So it needs to be individualized and not just the fluff that they've already heard, because that's kind of defeating for the parents. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely giving the kid like who they call if parents aren't available, if the friend's not available, if the aunt's not available, have steps kind of if they go through that, and then making sure that the parents have steps for themselves as well. In addition to that, making sure the aftercare is kind of definitely set in stone. I don't think kids should be discharged if there's not an appointment made with a therapist, an appointment made with whoever's doing the medication management. So those need to be made probably depending on the usual average length of stay at a facility. Within half that, they need to go ahead and call those physicians and get that on board so they can get on the waiting list so that by the time they're discharged, they're already have an appointment. So the worst thing, and I hate to see, is when kids are discharged and they don't have that set date for an appointment. That's just a nightmare. So part of that safety plan means that aftercare is also wrapped around the family. So as with a nice tight big red bow of completion. Okay, so in going through your experiences, that's I think what you guys should expect with regards to they cannot be discharged on safety. If they're telling you they're having outbursts and stuff like that, as an advocate for yourself, contact your insurance representative and get a case manager through your insurance because the insurance is paying the facility. Okay, so make sure you have a representative through your insurance. And on top of that, you can also say, well, he's on safety plan. He's not safe there. How can he be safe at home? And you're able to kind of confront that with those words as well.
All right. Very good. Thank you for that. So I want to shift a little bit. And Lisa kind of talked a little bit about her Christmas list, but I would like to hear from the parents' perspective, like what would you like to see shift or change, in these places and spaces to assist parents like yourselves with the children that you have that have these that are having this type of diagnosis or the experience or exhibiting these types of behaviors. What type of assistance or how can we support you? What support would you like to see?
Well, I think when you're talking about like the aftercare and opportunities for the children to transition back home, and we are, like Lisa said, we're not up 24/7. We don't have a full staff. Mm-hmm. What kind of support is available? And we are looking forward to working with Michael Williams from the Dash Foundation, who has a coaching program. He actually grew up in the foster care system, so he's uniquely qualified to work with children who come from hard places and struggle with RAD or other diagnoses. But these are services that are available when you have resources, and or you are exhausting your resources in order to have the services. And I think it's unfortunate, and it should not be that there is not support for these types of services, whether or not it can be covered by Medicaid, because we have private insurance, but we also have Medicaid because we have the benefits from the adoption. But it's difficult to get any of these services covered that are so necessary for part of the process. And I think that one of my, I guess, things that irritates me so much about the pro-life movement is that, to me, it feels very like pro-birth. There's a lot of money put into pro-birth, but when the children, as they are adopted, have the trauma, even if you adopt from infancy, that there's trauma from, they've been with their birth mother for 9 months, and they know the voice and the heartbeat that they no longer have. So they have a loss of a parent that they're experiencing, whether it's from birth or if they're 2, which was the age that we adopted our son. And so there is no support for the rest of that life. There's no support for that trauma. And I think that that's something society really needs to look at. If there is this whole pro-life movement, then support the whole life. Don't just support the birth.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that is. All right,
That
Lisa.
that was just amazing. I love that you said that, because so many people don't understand that they're cute babies, they're wonderful, they're small, and like you said, pro-choice, pro-choice, but it is for the rest of their lives, and it's for all their lives, and it's for every child that goes through the foster care system, and that includes kids that don't get adopted. And I want to just speak on that really briefly, because we've also mentored kids that didn't get adopted. So as much as we're out here advocating for our children, which it needs to be a full-time job, because it really is, I'm on the phone with insurance and doctors and meetings constantly for my one child because of this issue. But there's also teens that we've dealt with, that we've mentored, that are going through mental health stuff, that don't have a parent in their corner, but I can look at them and tell they need counseling and they need these services. And there needs to be some sort of program for those young people as well. I just want to throw that out there really quickly. There needs to be something out there for these kids that are aging out of the system, that don't have a family that adopted them, because there's a lot of them. A lot of kids are aging out. They don't have anybody that's advocating for them. We adopted a teenager. She came to us when she was 13, and we adopted her pretty quickly. I'm sorry, she came to us when she was 15, and we adopted her pretty quickly, and she's now in college. But she can tell me about her trauma. She can tell me what's going on, and the need is so great. I would love to see services for these kids that are aging out of the program. Number one. Number two, I think the waiting list for the few programs that do exist, and I know this is going to be a funding issue, but again, in order to get certain services, you have to go through certain programs. We were in line and waiting list for years, and I'm not exaggerating, for years to get certain services. Well, you couldn't move the pendulum until you got that service. So finding out a way to cut through some of the wait times, and I think that's a service provider issue. Increasing service providers in our area, changing the way Medicaid can pay out service providers, because that's been a big issue. We've had people that will provide, but then because the way Medicaid would or would not pay them, they stopped being a provider. So I don't know a lot about insurance, but having somebody kind of take a look at that, about the way Medicaid's being paid, and let's keep good providers on their payroll, because we need them. We don't need to cut back services for kids that are receiving Medicaid. We need to be making sure there are tons of services for kids that are receiving Medicaid, because a lot of those kids are the kids that are coming through the foster care system, and they definitely need it. And then I also would like to see some more support in the school system, because our kids have to go to school. They need to go to school. They need that socialization. But I also know how hard it is to be a teacher in that classroom and have 20 or 30 kids in your classroom, and then have a child like mine that requires so much time and energy. So having people that can be in, and not the parent, not me, not calling me to come and sit with my son or work with my son, but having somebody else that can go to the school and work with my son while he's at school, so I can be at home taking care of what I need to, but he's getting the education and the socialization that he needs. And he's not winning that situation, that tug of war, and being reinforced for his behaviors. So keeping him in school by any means necessary is very important, in my opinion. And then, I would like to see more residential programs specifically for kids that have been in the foster care system. I know there are lots of kids that have lots of issues, substance abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, but it is a little bit different when they've gone through the trauma of adoption. And I think there needs to be residential programs that specifically focus on kids that have gone through the foster care system. So those are just a few of the things. And I really think strongly that some of the laws need to be changed to address these, to put more teeth to what is in existence, because I know there's aftercare programs for once kids are adopted, but I also know that I've called aftercare and tried to get those services, and they'll tell me, oh, that provider doesn't exist anymore, or they're not taking Medicaid at this time, or sure, we'll put you on the wait list. So it's great to say that you have the services, but if I can't gain access to them, do you really have the services? So whatever we need to do to make this happen, if it's changing laws, if it's increasing funding, and I'm not one for throwing money at a problem, I'm more for let's lay out what we need to do to fix it and then put the money in there, because I don't want to waste our funding. But I think we need to be very, very, very much focused on these children, because they are going to grow up, they are going to have relationships, they are going to reproduce and have children. And if we can't train them and teach them and love them and protect them and nurture them to the point where they feel secure being loved, how are they going to be loved when they go out into the world? Because they're going to destroy every relationship they have.
Yeah.
And my kids are kids of color. Every one of my kids, whether they're multiracial, biracial, African American, they're all kids of color. So I know when they leave my home and they do some of the behaviors that they do at home, as the therapist has told me, why haven't you called the police? I'm a retired police officer. The reason I didn't call the police is because I did not want my 10-year-old son to start in the juvenile justice system. I wanted it to wait. It was already enough that he had to go through the foster care system. I didn't want him to go straight from the foster care system to the judicial system via the juvenile justice system.
Mm-hmm.
It may have to happen. Unfortunately, that may be a part of the process, but we are trying to protect our kids because the world sees them a lot different than we as their parents see them. And we all know that. That's just a fact. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and it starts with lawmakers, policymakers. It starts with the dependency system. It starts with parents recognizing the trauma of the children in their care. Yeah. And this conversation has been wonderful. I have so much respect for everybody on here, and I thank you all for each thing that you do, because it's so, so very important. And I've learned stuff already. So I'm just very, very, very fortunate to be here. I appreciate all of you.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for all of your wish list and the things that you said. We have two more kind of questions from the viewers that I definitely want to address as we prepare to close out this conversation. Misty Andrew, she said, what are treatment options for undiagnosed Red in Georgia, close to Savannah? We have thought about hospital treatment, but concerned he will learn more behaviors and it will be worse than now. Anybody know of anything in Georgia? And I know we're in Florida and Tennessee in terms of the panel tonight, but
well, there's kind of the Georgia's special, but to say the least, some of the inpatient hospitals are very difficult. So I'm not going to lie. So they're pretty rough. So the acute hospitalizations there, most of my patients that live in Georgia, I tell them to cross the line and come to Tennessee. if you need acute treatment. I do know the ones available for acute can be very difficult, which makes it difficult to kind of go that route. There are some PHP, IOP programs, and starting there. I know I'm affiliated with Embark Youth Services. They do have a PHP. I don't know how close that is to Savannah, but they do virtual, and Embark is kind of known for some of their rad work. So that's a possibility. And starting there, if you don't want to do kind of like a inpatient hospitalization stay, maybe starting with a partial hospitalization program or an intensive outpatient program to at least get your foot in the door with someone that may be more diverse and willing to kind of hear different options and hear different symptomatology to make a diagnosis that's necessary to move forward.
Okay. Thank you for attempting to, again, address that again, because I know you're in Tennessee. All right. And then the last question of the night is from Dr. Monica. She wants to know, is legislation needed to ensure training for providers and parents, guidelines regarding readiness for discharge, etc.? Any thoughts on that from anybody?
Yes. So if we want to see something standardized, if we want to see something where it's uniform somewhat across systems or within systems, the school system, it is going to require some legislation, right? Because the schools have their teacher training, and if we want to make sure that every teacher receives the same training on RAD, then we would legislation would need to be pursued. So that would mean folks need to reach out to your state legislators and start to explore where they are and how receptive they are to pursuing a level of legislation for training.
Okay. So, which is a good segue to our kind of call to action, which is to potentially establish some type of community work group to get going on the very thing that you just mentioned, Dr. Turner. And so, you know, in our own, before we came on this live tonight, that was one of the things that we talked about was just kind of putting that out there in terms of the viewers that are watching now as well as who will watch the replay. Is if anybody is interested in getting a community work group going to do some of this work, please, by all means, if right now you want to mention that in the comments, that would be wonderful. I will be perusing the comments after we get off the air. So if somebody checks out the replay, by all means, you can mention it there or send me a direct message. That would be great. Dr. Paula has a comment. She said, as a school psychologist, I see where school districts are not equipped to handle extreme explosive behaviors. Typically, a behavior analyst would need to support developing a BIP. However, we don't have enough behavior analysts to go around. Okay.
I think BIP, correct me if I'm wrong, is behavior improvement plan.
Okay, probably. Yeah. Okay. All right. She said, unfortunately, districts will immediately lean on self-contained EBD programming to address the behaviors. Mm-hmm. I don't know what all these acronyms mean, but y'all probably do. Okay. Tonja, you said staffing is a huge opportunity for schools to be properly equipped to manage anticipated RAD behaviors. And for those of you who may have joined us late, RAD is reactive attachment disorder. Okay, she said behavior intervention plans is what a BIP is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so no takers on the community work group right now, which is fine. But it is something that is, I think, would be a kind of a natural next step for this. Okay, Dr. Monica said, count me in. Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Monica. All right. So, Dr. Monica, again, you are on the record in terms of wanting to do the work of this community work group. So maybe we can establish a way for folks to communicate with you if they are interested in working with you and getting this community work group going. So let's circle back and get something, I guess, out in the social media atmosphere so that folks can connect with you. Thank you again, Dr. Monica. Dr. Paula said emotional behavior disorder program. That's what the EBD is. Thank you for letting us know what that is. All right, so we are a little bit over our time, and I definitely want to be respectful of the time. So I want to give you all opportunities if you would like to give some closing remarks. And Dr. Shairi, I want you to go last because I want you to just briefly mention the crisis text line. Okay. All right. So Lisa, you want to go first?
Well, I just want to say that this is a conversation that is so incredibly important, and I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to get together and have the conversation. And I hope it reaches a lot of parents because at the end of the day, the parents are the ones that are dealing with the kids on a daily basis. And I'm so happy to see so many people so invested in young people and advocating for our kids because I truly am one of those people that believe that our kids are our future, and how we advocate for them and how we take care of them says a lot about our society and who we are as a people. So I just really believe that conversations like these are important, and don't ever stop advocating for your child. Don't ever feel like you're wrong or you're pushing too hard or you're stepping on the wrong person's toes. That means you're probably doing something very right. So keep advocating, keep pushing, and I'm on Facebook. I'm old school, so I don't know a lot about social media, but I am on Facebook. And if there are any parents that ever feel like they need to reach out or talk, I don't know all the answers, but I will definitely listen, and I've definitely got stories. So um, don't ever feel like you're alone because it does it is hard. It's not easy. Loving these kids is definitely not easy. Worth it 100% over and over again, but it's not easy. So again, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it so much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to participate tonight.
Thank you so much, Tonja.
I echo what Lisa is saying, especially when it comes to recognizing the importance of community. And, you know, it does feel lonely at times when you're parenting a child that has these types of challenges because it's very unlike the norm. And especially like in our culture where behavior is supposed to be at a specific level, and, there are expectations and judgments that can be made when people don't understand the diagnoses or the challenges that your child is facing. And so I think this is just a great opportunity to conversations like these can help encourage empathy and more curiosity to learn like what's going on and really care and demonstrate love to children and families who are working through these types of challenges. And also, if you are a family like ours, to know that, we have community with each other. And like Lisa has stories, I've got stories too. So, recognize that you're not alone, but it's that exchange that we can help share solutions, but also offer encouragement. I mean, I'm super encouraged whenever I hear Dr. Sims talk about improvements or things that she's seen work with her patients, and hear these opportunities. And as we recognize we're in a marathon, then it's these simple things that can give us hope to make it to the next step and know that we're on a journey. And as long as we keep going forward, then there's more hope for our children. And as we intervene, we can expect and look forward to a bright future. And I think personally, I'm so excited about the work that we're going to begin with Michael Williams, is because I look at him and recognize his story, which in his teen years very much matches my son's. And now to see him, I just have hope. And I know it's still a journey, it's still a
Yes.
process, but I think that hope is, especially this time of year, where it's a great time to know that you've got hope and you're not alone. And I think as long as we continue to encourage and build community and practice empathy, that our society will improve.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Dr. Sims.
Well, thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure to be with such wonderful women, and helping our youth with mental health issues. Mental health is definitely always kind of at the bottom of the pole and trying to get extra funding and assistance.
Yeah.
But hopefully, educating people and bringing to light a disorder that needs more attention, because we have so many kids that need these families to want to adopt, and having an understanding of the trauma of reactive attachment is necessary. A parent said to me they feel, it just explains it altogether. I feel imprisoned by my child's behavior.
Mm.
And so, in saying that, you feel kind of what that family feels day to day, but they're
Mm.
still fighting for it, to kind of fighting for their child to kind of come out on the other side. So I think that when the family has that, it's just really having that understanding of what they're going through and helping them kind of go through the crises after crises after crises, to let that child know that, we're not rejecting you no matter how bad it gets, because that's kind of what they're expecting. And so even as providers, we have to make sure that that kid throwing that tantrum in our office, okay, it's part of the reactive attachment. And part of that is they're trying to push anybody away that cares for them. So as providers, we can't fall into the trap and get frustrated by the behaviors, because we have to stay in the trenches with them to kind of make sure that we're going to be with them, and that the behavior is not going to make us not love them and care for them and want the best for them at the same time. So, and that's the trap that I think a lot of providers get into, and we just have to make sure we understand the trap, and that we don't fall into it. So I applaud you, ladies, with continuing the fight. And it's not an easy one. It's not an easy one, but you're setting the example for those that, and how they should follow, and what they should do, and what it takes to kind of help their kid come out on the other side.
Thank you, Dr. Sims. Dr. Turner.
Yes. So thank you, Nicole, for using your platform not once, but twice to bring this conversation to life, to help parents who feel trapped by their children's behavior. I think that's such a powerful statement, and a powerful vision, a powerful image. And thank you to Dr. Simms, who always brings such wonderful insight and advice for parents who are struggling. And then Lisa and Tonja, thank you for just being vulnerable and sharing your stories for the betterment and for the help of other parents.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you to Dr. Monica for being the engine behind this, and
Yeah.
willing to take the lead, be the conductor on the next steps. So definitely appreciate you as well. What I would add is that I am the Chief Health Officer for Crisis Text Line, and we provide free 24/7 mental health support and crisis intervention in English and in Spanish. So anyone can text HELP or AYUDA to 741-741 and receive in the moment support from a trained volunteer crisis counselor who is supervised by our staff mental health professional. And this would apply to both young people who are in need of support, but also in this instance, I want to remind parents that Crisis Text Line is there in the moment, especially when you feel at your most alone, at your most isolated, at your most imprisoned sometimes that there is someone available by text, middle of the night, 24/7, free, who can be there and talk you through those really difficult and challenging and isolating moments.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, whew, this is a heavy topic, as I mentioned from the onset. But hopefully, our viewers have learned some more about this condition, but also just that there's hope, and there's support. So, as has already been mentioned, the crisis text line is one of those lifelines, but Dr. Monica has so graciously offered to lead us here locally in Tallahassee, in the Tallahassee area, with a work group, a community work group, to maybe help fulfill some of the wishes that our parents have expressed tonight. So I just want us to keep this conversation going. So for those of you who are tuning in right now, please share this with someone that you think can benefit from it, that you think can be a decision maker to help, again, move the needle forward. Because, it is, even Tonja has mentioned, like, we need to be looking after the full life of these children, because they're going to be adults and they're going to have some of the same issues if they are untreated. So thank you all so much. And I'm going to change this. Yes, so we can see everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. A great conversation as usual. Again, thank you, Dr. Monica, for, like Dr. Turner said, being the engine, the force behind this. Kristen Andrews also mentioned Lisa. She said, thank you for sharing your story with us, especially identifying that adoption is trauma. So again, much needed conversation. Thank you to our viewers for your comments, your questions. That has also helped move this conversation forward this evening. So again, let's keep this going. Thank you. It's nothing more for me to say. Y'all have a great rest of the evening, and let's move forward with some action. All right. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.